if you're missing some of them. I was also, as a side point, I was looking at last year, we began the class on November 8th. So we are, this is the last day, one year, as of tomorrow, we 1 year since we started the class. So I'm really, really proud of that. Personally, I feel very accomplished with that myself. And I think we've got a good thing going here. So I think we could say we're just about halfway through the book. There's 13 chapters. We're in chapter 7. And chapter 7 itself is pretty long. So we're about halfway through. So I guess we got another year to go or so. So, but as it is, I think we're going well. I think it's going well and at a good pace. And I'm proud of what we're doing. And I think we've got a nice core group here that joins, and a couple of people who pop in every once in a while, which is also nice. And so anyway, I want to thank you all personally for joining us. And I think we're doing some good stuff here. So without any further ado, I will jump into the screen share and we can take a look at this together. All right. As I mentioned, we're still in the middle of chapter 7. It's a long one. It's a very long chapter. So we're still kind of making our way through it. And he's gone a couple of different directions, but really for the past couple of verses, he's kind of stayed in the same place. Obviously building layer upon layer. I think it's really interesting what he's been doing because he's gonna, as he keeps on doing, he's gonna flip it on its head a little bit with this week. So if you recall last week, we had, or the past couple of weeks, let's go back. We had a past couple of weeks. We said in verse number, let's go back here a little bit. We said in verse number 16 and 17, don't be overly righteous, don't be, or as we kind of understood it, don't be self-righteous or, holier than thou with other people. Also, don't be overly wicked, okay? And obviously you run into a problem. What does it mean, overly wicked? You can be kind of wicked, you can't be, just not overly wicked. And so we had discussions about that, what exactly those phrases mean, and how it's really coming to tell us that when we're trying to make relationships with other people, or when we're trying to influence other people, so there's a very fine line a person has to walk. You have to walk in this line between, you don't want to come off as greater than somebody or on a different level than the person if you want to influence them, but it also doesn't mean that you should lower yourself to standards that are below what you value, right? To give up on your own values if you want to help other people. So, and then we saw last week that what he says is that the right path is for a person to grab onto this one and also not let go of that one. To obviously a person wants to be righteous, a person wants to do what's correct, what's right and good in this world, but at the same time to not give up entirely on the things that they have to work on. What we said last week is the person should try to kind of find the place where when a person has something that they like, that they don't appreciate about their own selves, they have to kind of identify what is it that's pushing me in that direction. Why do I act this way? And how could I use that same midah, that same characteristic of myself, how can I use it in a better direction? And then we got into this interesting thing with verse number 19 and 20. Verse number 19 and 20, they said that, at least how we understood it, that wisdom has a tendency to create an arrogance inside of a person. If a person is wise, knows that they're wise, they know that they've got wisdom inside of them. So there's unfortunately a tendency that can create a certain level of arrogance inside of a person. And as he puts it, it could make the person arrogant beyond the 10 masters that are in the city, the 10 controllers in the city. That was a strange phrase we saw, but the way we kind of looked at it was that you have to look at what's going on around you when even if a person is smart and wise and is well thought and has good things going through their mind, and they're smart, but when you see that you're going against the tide, And particularly this idea of 10 masters of the city, right? You've got a society, and not just a society, but you got the great people of the society going in a different direction than you are. So at the very least, a person should ask themselves why there's that discrepancy. Why is it that they're going one way and I'm going a different way? Doesn't mean that they're right necessarily. Doesn't, but it definitely does. It also doesn't mean that you're right. Just because if a person sees that they're going in a different direction than everybody else, they at least should ask themselves, why is it that other people are going in a different direction? What's causing them to go their direction? What's causing me to go my direction? And perhaps, at least at the very least, a person should be willing to question their motives and to question things that they hold, that they believe, question their beliefs, and at least try to understand, perhaps there's something here that I'm missing, something else that I should be gaining. And I think that, and again, as he's saying over here, that seems to be the real mark of wisdom, is for a person to be able to question their own beliefs. And as he put it succinctly in verse number 20, was he said, because nobody is perfect. There's no such thing as a righteous person in the land that does only good and does not sin. Right? Every single person makes mistakes. So therefore, it's worthwhile for a person to be intellectually honest and to be able to question themselves, especially when they're being faced by other people, by a popular opinion that's not theirs, that they don't share. And so that leads us now to verse number 21, where again, he, as he always does, he's going to flip it just a little bit and say, but perhaps a person should also be willing to stand by their guns. Okay, and that's what we find here in verse number 21. Let's see this inside now. Gam l'chol hadvarim asher yidaberu, but also for all those things that they speak, al titein libecha, do not give over your heart. Do not place your heart. Meaning, don't automatically assume that everything everybody else tells you is right either. Asher lo tishma et avdecha mekalalecha. It's kind of a strange end of the verse. He says, in order so that you will not hear your servant or your slave cursing you. Okay, so once again, gam l'chol hadvarim asher yidaberu. Also, for all those things that they speak to you, al titein libecha, do not give over your heart. Do not give your heart. Asher lo tishma et avdecha mekalalecha, in order so that you should not hear your servant or your slave to cursing you. Now, that's a strange thing to say, kind of a non sequitur. But I think this is what he's trying to say over here is that I just told you, King Solomon says, I just told you that a person should be willing and to question their own reasonings for things, particularly, and this is how he puts it, particularly when you are faced with a lot of people telling you otherwise, not just a lot of people, smart people telling you otherwise. If a person finds that they have other smart people around them telling them that they're wrong, they should at least be willing to question those beliefs that they have, at least think about it. And so what he's adding over here is, now, just because somebody does tell you something and they're smart, even smarter than you perhaps, that doesn't mean that you have to accept it as total fact. Both these extremes are true in this case. You should be willing to question your own beliefs. On the other hand, you should also be willing to question what other people tell you too. So the way he puts that again over here is that all those things that they tell you, don't go for all those things that they tell you, right? I guess you can kind of look at it as, why does he say l'chol hadvarim, for all the things that they tell you? I think that's that emphasis on all the things. That's what he's kind of trying to focus on, is don't just assume that because they tell you a bunch of things, all of it's true, right? The famous joke that people say, it must be true, I heard it on the internet, right? I read it on the internet. Obviously, when you have a lot of people telling you things, it doesn't mean that it's true. So we're stuck in this situation where we've got, on one hand, we're being told to question our beliefs, and on the other hand, we're being told to not just accept things as obviously true just because other people tell it to you. And again, that's this constant fight that King Solomon is going through for this intellectual honesty, to try and find a place where the absolute truth, okay, where we know we're right. He already told us the only place you're going to find that was earlier in this chapter also, the only place you're really going to find that is in the acts of God, right? Which you can either understand as the Torah itself, the word of God that comes to us, or you can understand that perhaps potentially as objective science, things that are beyond reproach, that there are certain things that are just real, they are just the basis of reality. They are objective truths. So in that sense, when we're trying to find this search for truth in the society around us, on one hand, you want to take into account what everyone tells you, especially those 10 masters of the city. On the other hand, you also don't want to accept everything that everybody tells you is obviously true, because that's not the case, right? You have your own level of wisdom with which you can filter things through. And he says, what's the problem if you do that? What's the problem if you take everything that's told to you as truth? You know, what are you going to face? He says, you're going to end up hearing your servant cursing you. Now, that's a very interesting phrase. Why would he say that? Why this focus on the servant cursing person? So what kind of stood out to me in this was that we have a contrast, because who were we told to at least pay attention to, if not agree with? We're told to consider the word of the 10 masters of the city. Now, so master of the city, right, whatever position, government position we would consider that to potentially be, the master of the city is somebody who's got full control, who they, to a certain degree, control you, your life. You owe them something, and they're somebody who, due to, I'm guessing the way we're looking at it is due to their wisdom, they achieve a level of respect that you should listen to them. But when you accept everything that comes at you, so then it gets harder to discern where exactly the source is, who's the source of this information. And then you may end up hearing something that comes from somebody from a very different place, something from a very different place. You listen to everything that comes at you. You might think it may be coming from the 10 masters of the city, but it may be coming from somebody else. Maybe coming from your servant. Now, your servant in this case would be the opposite. It's somebody who's dependent upon you, somebody who looks to you for wisdom, somebody who is actually wisdom in a wisdom sense below your status. But they may be telling you things and may be coming to you in this big jumble of information from other people. And because you're accepting everything, you'll hear what they say. And that's not necessarily appropriate, or not appropriate, I would say. Now, not to say that just because somebody is on a lower class, if you had a class system, which we don't really deal with in the same way nowadays, but if somebody is in a lower class, that means that they're worse than you. But I think the idea is the same, that when you are listening to the wisdom of people greater than you, so you want to be open-minded. But when you're listening to what somebody lower than you in wisdom is saying, so then you have to really be careful filtering that. He refers to this influence of the servant as a kilala, as a curse, right? Lo tishma et avdecha mekalalecha. You don't want to hear your servant cursing you, because this information, this idea that comes to you from a source that's unfiltered, from a source that's dependent on you, is like a curse. The way I kind of see this also in a way is, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot the past couple of days, is we have a tendency to we are all dependent on other people to some degree or another, and the people that we owe the most are also the people that we can perhaps hold the most against. When you know that you owe somebody a lot, it can create a feeling of guilt, a feeling of I owe you too much, and I don't want to admit to that fact. So when you are looking to the wisdom of these other people, of the greater people than you, so that can create a certain level of resentment. Imagine if the whole reason why you are disagreeing with what they say to you is just because you resent them, not because you're actually searching for wisdom. And that may be the same thing when you're dealing with wisdom that comes from below your own wisdom. It may be coming at you because that person just resents you. And that's why they're trying to lead you in a different direction than what you understand to be actually truth. So that's kind of how I see this. Lo tishma et avdecha mekalecha. You don't want to hear your servant curse you. It's the contrast to the 10 masters that were in the city that were mentioned previously. So this verse is kind of tell you that when questioning your intellect, when being intellectually honest and questioning your own beliefs, you also want to filter what you're hearing. You want to make sure that what you're hearing is not just something that's you're not just taking in every bit that you hear and saying, oh, then yeah, obviously that's true. You want to be, again, continuously filtering the things that you're hearing and the things that are coming to you. Okay, so that is verse number 21. I have to apologize. I thought my throat was a lot better than it is, and it's really not. I'm feeling a terrible pain in my throat right now, and I would go for our regularly scheduled 45 minutes, but I don't think I have it in me right now. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna bring us back to the regular screen right now. We'll pick up next week. But yeah, I got something going on in my throat, and it's really kind of painful. So anyway,
hope you have a speedy
I
recovery.
apologize.
Yeah. We're sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I hope you have a
feel
speedy
better.
recovery.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, God willing, we'll pick up next week. And again, thank you for our first year, completing our first year. And yeah, look forward to continuing.
Thank you.